We live in a rural community on the Navajo reservation. My aunt and her two brothers were home alone while my grandparents had left for the evening to attend a chapter house meeting. They were in the house, and like many people from the reservation, they didn't have electricity. It had been dark outside for about an hour, and my aunt and uncles were getting ready for bed. Outside, they heard noises, as if someone was moving things around. My oldest uncle went to look out the front window and saw a figure by the truck. This was immensely out of the ordinary, because the closest neighbor was miles away. Whatever it was opened the truck door and began to dig through the personal items that my family had left in the vehicle. My aunt and uncles were frightened by the sight and knew they should take action. They took out the rifle and all steadied themselves to hold it up. They flung open the door and aimed the gun at the dark figure. The figure turned and started to walk towards them, totally unfazed by the weapon. My uncle pulled the trigger, but nothing happened. The figure drew closer, and my aunt began to smell something like a rotting corpse. It was so strong it made her gag. My uncle continued to pull the trigger with no luck, and the figure came closer and closer. Off in the distance, headlights were coming up the road. My grandparents were returning. The figure looked toward the lights and started to move away, tucking itself behind a tree near the house. My oldest uncle ran toward the truck with the gun. My grandfather got out of the car, and my uncle pointed to the tree. The thing was poking out its head to observe what they were doing. My grandfather ran into the house, grabbed a handful of ashes from the stove, rubbed them over the gun, and placed an ash-covered bullet into the chamber. He walked out onto the porch and fired toward the tree. Whatever that thing was, it didn't expect the gun to go off. The gunshot echoed, and the dark figure began running. My grandma chased my aunt inside, and my uncles and my grandfather went after. There weren't many roads or paths, so as my grandfather and uncles chased after the figure, the truck was bouncing, and the headlights were not fixed on one particular spot. My uncle swears that whenever the headlights would hit the figure, he saw a woman. Not only that, but whoever it was running on all fours like a bear. My grandfather eventually stopped up the truck as they neared the ditch that drops about 20 feet. He got out and began to yell in Navajo. My uncle says that he was yelling about a local woman. He yelled that he wasn't scared and that he knew it was her and to leave his family alone. A few days passed, and there was news that the woman my grandfather was yelling about had passed away. I've always been told that if you know who the Skinwalker is, say their name and it will kill them. I've always been a skeptic. Ghosts, aliens, monsters, they were all just stories to me. But after what I experienced in the Southwest, my perspective on the unknown has been forever altered. I was on a road trip with my best friend Jake. We had decided to take a detour through the Navajo reservation in Arizona, mainly because of the scenic beauty and the rich history of the area. We had heard tales of skinwalkers, but we laughed them off. They were just myth, right? Our first day on the reservation was uneventful. We visited a few local spots, interacted with some of the locals, and set up camp near a canyon. As night fell, we sat around our campfire, sharing stories and enjoying the serenity of the desert. Around midnight, Jake decided to turn in. I stayed up, mesmerized by the stars. The Milky Way stretched across the sky, and I felt a profound sense of peace. That is, until I heard it. A low, guttural growl echoed through the canyon. I froze, thinking it might be a coyote or a mountain lion. But then I heard a voice. It was distorted, as if someone was speaking through a broken radio, but it was unmistakably Jake's voice. "Come here," beckoned. Confused, I turned to our tent. Jake was sound asleep. The voice called out again, this time from the opposite direction. I grabbed a flashlight and shone it towards the source. What I saw will haunt me forever. Standing on a ridge was a figure. It looked like a man, but its limbs were elongated and its eyes glowed a sickly yellow. It wore tattered clothing, and its skin was a mottled gray. But the most disturbing part was its face. It was Jake's face. I stumbled back, my heart racing. Creature mimicked Jake's voice again. "Come here." It took a step towards me, its movements jerky and unnatural. I bolted to the tent, shaking Jake awake. "We need to go. Now," I hissed. He looked at me, confused, but the urgency in my voice spurred him into action. We packed up as quickly as we could, creature's voice echoing around us, mimicking our voices, our laughter, our conversations from earlier. As we sped away in our car, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The creature stood in the middle of the road, watching us, yellow eyes glowing in the darkness. We didn't stop driving until we reached the nearest town. We checked into a motel, and I spent the night researching skinwalkers. The legend said they were witches, could take the form of animals or people, using their voices to lure victims. I don't know what we encountered that night, but I do know one thing: the stories are real. The Southwest is beautiful, but it holds secrets that are beyond comprehension. And I'll never set foot on the Navajo reservation again. To all of you listening, please be careful when you venture into unknown territories. Some legends are rooted in truth, and some nightmares are very, very real. I was coming home from basketball practice one evening during the colder months, and it was already dark as I pulled into my neighborhood. Not a fenced community, but there are streetlights, and the houses aren't too far apart. As I neared my home, I noticed a group of dogs ahead. It wasn't uncommon to see stray dogs in our rural community, scavenging for food. There were 4 of them, sitting in a circle facing each other. It seemed odd, but I didn't think much of it at the time. Because of the neighborhood layout, I couldn't drive too fast, so I slowly approached the group of dogs. As I passed by, something caught my eye in my peripheral vision. A brown dog from the group was trotting alongside my car. I didn't pay much attention until I hit a speed bump, causing my car to wobble. I glanced over at the dog again, and it was still there, keeping pace with my car. Feeling increasingly uneasy, I tried to ignore it and sped up, mindful of the speed bumps, but the dog continued to stay right alongside me. Eventually, I had to stop at a stop sign. Tried not to look. Curiosity got the better of me. When I glanced over at the dog, it was facing forward. As I continued staring, it slowly turned its head towards me. Instead of a dog's face, I saw the flat face of a man covered in hair, grinning from ear to ear. Fear shot through my body, and I immediately floored the pedal, not daring to look back in my rearview mirror. I reached home, barely able to get inside, weakened by fear. I sobbed as I told my aunt everything that happened. She comforted me, and we scheduled a meeting with a medicine man the next day. That night, I couldn't sleep. I felt ill and heard people outside laughing and speaking in Navajo. I brushed it off, thinking it was just neighbors nearby. At the meeting with the medicine man, he told me I was fortunate. The skinwalker I had seen wasn't after me. I had just happened to see it while it was out causing trouble for someone else. He explained that the laughter and talking I heard at night were the skinwalker communicating with its companions, letting them know I had seen it and that it had frightened me. The medicine man emphasized that if the skinwalker had targeted me and I had seen it in its true form, it could have been deadly. After that encounter, I faced many challenges and health issues, forcing me to take a break from basketball. Through ceremonies and support, I eventually recovered and got back on my feet. This experience left a lasting impact on me, constant reminder of the unseen forces that exist around us. While I have moved on, the memory of that night and the eerie smile of the skinwalker will forever be etched in my mind.